Trace, thank you very much. It's a tough story. Joining me now, attorney Emily Compagno and attorney Seth Berenzweig, who specializes in sports law. Welcome to both of you. Good to have you here tonight. Seth, let me start with you. The New York medical examiner ruled this a homicide. Is there an opportunity then for when this is charged to become more than assault?
Well, there's certainly an opportunity for that, but when the coroner or even the police department enter a finding, that's not binding on the district attorney's office. And the coroner's office is in charge of the cause of death, but that's not directly connected to the responsibility for that death. I think the bottom line on this case is that, unfortunately, the law indicates there are times where you end up with a very shocking result. Our heart goes out to the mother, and we understand her wondering, why would this never go beyond a simple misdemeanor assault? But the problem is that New York criminal law has some unique aspects that make it difficult to charge someone for murder or homicide in the absence of an intention to cause either death or serious disfigurement. That's not here, so we end up with a very difficult gray area and a very tragic case.
Well, Emily, how much comes down to the power behind the punch, as the mother is discussing there, and does that go to intent? The other factor here is there are some suggestion that he was drunk. So, you know, his own ability to respond to that punch or to maybe not be able to stand, if indeed that was the case, would definitely be determined in an autopsy, I would imagine.
Right. Well, there's a few salient points here that viewers need to understand. Now, first, the one-punch killings, as they're known as, they're not really that rare. In fact, multiple states have passed legislation dealing with them, and because the victim is oftentimes drunk, that actually has a higher propensity for death. It either severs a back artery in the brain, or if they're knocked out and they hit their skull on the pavement, then that's a huge hemorrhage or a skull fracture. So, in fact, the state of New York passed in 2015 a Senate bill that accounted for what was then a one-punch killing of a 59-year-old man in the Bronx by 17-year-old. They were so aghast at the fact that this does happen, actually, and so it empowers prosecutors to prosecute a felony charge for, it would be second-degree manslaughter for this kind of case. And so the intent is simply an appreciation and then a disregard of this kind of circumstance, which is basically an unjustifiable, substantial and significant outcome. So here it falls squarely within that. And again, it's much more common than we think, and that's why the law in New York has accounted for it.
All right. So, Seth, in terms of the fact that, as we heard the mother say, that he left the scene and they didn't hear from him for several days afterwards. What's the impact of that?
Well, I think that certainly if it was a vehicular incident, then that would relate to a more traditional definition under the law of a hit and run. But in a situation like this, I don't think that it really necessarily changes the analysis with respect to whether this is a situation where he'll be held responsible for murder or homicide. It's true that the New York legislature has looked at changes in the law like this. One comparable change that was considered in 2016 actually didn't pass for change in the legislature. Another tragic aspect to also keep in mind here is that from a civil liability standpoint, there's no indication that Wake Forest would be on the hook for any kind of liability to the family, because this was a tort, this was an attack that happened outside the scope of his employment. And even if there was a judgment against this coach, he would probably be able to discharge it in bankruptcy. So tragically,
how much time could he potentially do here, Seth?
Well, if it is charged as a misdemeanor in this class, it would be within 1 year, and absent charging above that, not a day longer.
All right. Emily, Seth, thank you very much. Good to have both of you with us tonight.